It was November, and the rain came down like sheets of steel against the windshield. Marcus Henrique Santos had been driving the number 47 bus route through São Paulo for 11 years, and he'd seen every kind of weather the city could throw at him. But tonight felt different. The kind of different that settles in your bones and makes you grip the wheel a little tighter. The wipers worked frantically, slapping back and forth, barely keeping up with the downpour. Outside, the streets of Zona Leste were flooding. Water pooled at every intersection, turning the asphalt into rivers that reflected the amber glow of streetlights like broken mirrors. Marcus's shift should have ended 20 minutes ago. His daughter Isabella was home alone, probably doing her chemistry homework at the kitchen table, waiting for him to bring home the pão de queijo he'd promised her. She was 14 now, smart as hell, studying for the entrance exams that could get her into a good federal school. Marcus worked double shifts some weeks, so she wouldn't have to worry about notebooks or textbooks or anything else. He was tired, the kind of tired that makes your shoulders ache and your eyes burn, but he kept driving because that's what you do. You keep going. The bus was nearly empty, just an old woman in the back clutching a plastic shopping bag, and a young couple seated near the middle, the girl's head resting on the boy's shoulder. Marcus could hear the rhythmic hiss of the brakes, the squeak of wet seats, the constant drumming of rain on the metal roof. He was thinking about getting home, about kicking off his boots, about sitting down with Isabella and asking her how her day went. That's when he saw the kid. The boy was standing at a bus stop that wasn't even marked as an official stop. It was just a metal pole near a vacant lot, the kind of place people sometimes waited when they didn't know the route well. The kid couldn't have been more than 12. Skinny, soaked through. His school uniform clung to his body, and his backpack hung off one shoulder like it weighed more than he did. No umbrella, no jacket, just standing there in the rain, arms wrapped around himself, shivering. Marcus's foot hovered over the gas pedal. This wasn't a scheduled stop. He was already late. The kid would figure it out. There'd be another bus. There always was. But then, Marcus saw the boy's face in the headlights. The kid wasn't crying, but his eyes had that hollow look, the one Marcus recognized from his own childhood, the look of someone who'd learned not to ask for help because help didn't usually come. Marcus cursed under his breath and hit the brakes. The bus hissed to a stop. He opened the doors, and the sound of the rain got louder, aggressive, almost violent. The boy looked up, surprised, like he'd been ready to stand there all night. Vem molek, entra logo antes que tu vir peixe. Come on, kid. Get in before you turn into a fish. Marcus's voice was gruff, but there was something underneath it. Not quite kindness, not quite pity. Something human. The boy hesitated, then climbed the steps. Water poured off him in streams, pooling on the floor of the bus. He fumbled for change in his pocket, but his hands were shaking so badly he kept dropping the coins. Marcus watched him struggle for a moment, then waved him off. Esquece, senta aí, e para de pingar no chão. Forget it. Sit down and stop dripping everywhere. The boy didn't say thank you. He didn't say anything. He just moved to a seat near the front, still clutching his backpack, staring out the window at nothing. Marcus pulled the bus back onto the road, and for a few minutes there was only the sound of the rain and the engine and the wipers working overtime. Como é teu nome? Marcus asked, not looking at the boy, keeping his eyes on the road. What's your name? The kid didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the storm. Rafael. Rafael o quê? Rafael Lima. Marcus nodded. Onde tu mora, Rafael Lima? Perto da Avenida Aricanduva. That was 3 stops away. Marcus adjusted his grip on the wheel and kept driving. He didn't ask why the kid was out so late, or where his parents were, or why he looked like he'd been carrying the weight of the world in that backpack. Some questions didn't need asking. Marcus had been that kid once, different decade, different circumstances, same feeling. The feeling that the world was too big and you were too small and nobody gave a damn either way. When they reached Avenida Aricanduva, Marcus slowed the bus. Aqui? Here? Rafael stood up, still dripping. He looked at Marcus for the first time, really looked at him, and something passed between them. Not gratitude exactly, more like recognition. Valeu, the kid said. Thanks. Marcus just nodded. Vai pra casa, e da próxima vez pega guarda-chuva. Go home, and next time, bring an umbrella. Rafael got off the bus and disappeared into the rain. Marcus watched him go, then closed the doors and continued his route. He thought about the kid for maybe 5 more minutes, then let it go. You couldn't carry every story you came across. You'd drown in them. By the time he got home, he'd forgotten the boy's name. Just another face in the blur of a long shift. 2 years passed. Isabella turned 16. She got into the school she wanted, a technical program in environmental engineering. Marcus was proud of her in a way that made his chest tight. She was going places he'd never dreamed of. She was smart, determined, headstrong. Sometimes too headstrong. She'd inherited his stubbornness, the part of him that refused to quit, even when quitting made sense. It was a gift and a curse. It was late April when everything changed. The rainy season had started early that year, and the storms were worse than usual. Flood warnings went out across the city. The news kept showing footage of neighborhoods underwater, cars floating down streets, families evacuated from their homes. Marcus had seen it all before. São Paulo flooded. It was part of life in the city. You learned to navigate it. That Friday night, Isabella had stayed late at school for a science competition meeting. She'd texted Marcus around 8 to say she was catching the bus home. He told her to be careful, to keep her phone charged, to call if she needed anything. She sent back a thumbs-up emoji. Typical Isabella, always confident, always capable. But then the storm hit. Not the regular rain, but the kind that turned day into night and streets into rivers. Marcus was at home, watching the news, when his phone rang. It was Isabella. Her voice was tight, controlled, but he could hear the fear underneath. Pai, eu tô presa. Dad, I'm stuck. Marcus's stomach dropped. O que aconteceu? A rua alagou. O ônibus parou e todo mundo desceu. Mas agora eu não consigo atravessar. Tem água até o joelho e tá subindo rápido. Eu tô numa calçada, mas... The street flooded. The bus stopped and everyone got off, but now I can't cross. The water's up to my knees and rising fast. I'm on a sidewalk, but the line crackled with static. Isabella! Marcus was already grabbing his keys, his wallet, his phone charger. Me manda tua localização. Agora. Send me your location. Now. The location came through. She was near Parque do Carmo, about 4 kilometers away. In normal traffic, maybe 15 minutes. In this storm, with half the streets closed and water everywhere, it could take an hour, maybe more. Marcus felt panic rising in his throat, but he pushed it down. Panic didn't help, action helped. He ran to his car, an old Chevrolet Celta that had seen better days. The engine coughed to life, and he pulled out into the storm. The rain was so heavy he could barely see past the hood. His headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating sheets of water falling from the sky like curtains. The streets were chaos, cars abandoned at intersections, people wading through water up to their waists, traffic lights out, emergency vehicles trying to navigate the mess. Marcus called Isabella. Tô indo, meu amor. Fica onde tu tá. Não tenta atravessar sozinha. I'm coming, sweetheart. Stay where you are. Don't try to cross alone. Pai, tá frio e escuro. Dad, it's cold and dark. Her voice cracked and it broke something in him. Eu sei, filha, eu sei, mas eu tô indo, tu vai ficar bem. I know, baby, I know, but I'm coming. You're going to be okay. He drove like a man possessed, taking side streets, cutting through parking lots, doing everything he could to get to her. But the water kept rising. Twice he had to turn back because the road ahead was completely submerged. He was screaming at the windshield, at the rain, at God, at whatever forces conspired to keep him from his daughter. Then his car stalled. He was 3 blocks from her location when the engine choked and died. Water had gotten into something vital. Marcus tried to restart it, pumping the gas, turning the key until his wrist hurt. Nothing. The car was dead. He slammed his hands against the steering wheel and cursed. Then he got out. The water was up to his shins, cold and filthy, full of debris. He started wading through it, his phone held above his head, calling Isabella. Meu carro morreu, tô indo a pé, me fala onde tu tá exatamente. My car died. I'm going on foot. Tell me exactly where you are. Tem uma farmácia aqui. Farmácia São Paulo. Eu tô do lado de fora, embaixo da marquise. There's a pharmacy here. Farmácia São Paulo. I'm outside, under the awning. Marcus knew that pharmacy. He pushed forward, fighting the current. His legs burned, his lungs screamed, but he kept moving. 3 blocks became 2, 2 became 1. He could see the pharmacy's green neon sign flickering in the distance. Almost there, almost. That's when he heard the shout, a young man's voice, urgent and clear even over the storm. Senhor, senhor, espera, não vai por aí. Sir, sir, wait, don't go that way. Marcus turned. A guy in his early 20s was running toward him, splashing through the water. He was wearing a volunteer vest, the kind the civil defense teams wore during emergencies. His face was familiar in a way Marcus couldn't place. The guy reached him, breathing hard. A rua da frente desmoronou. Tem buraco enorme. Se tu entrar ali, tu cai. The street ahead collapsed. There's a huge hole. If you go in there, you'll fall. Marcus looked at the darkness ahead, then back at the young man. Minha filha tá ali, na farmácia. My daughter's there, at the pharmacy. The young man's expression changed. Understanding, then determination. Eu sei jeito. Vem comigo. I know a way, come with me. They moved together through the flooded streets, the young man leading Marcus around the collapsed section of road, through an alley, past abandoned cars and fallen tree branches. The whole time, Marcus kept his phone to his ear, talking to Isabella, telling her he was close, telling her to hold on. The young man moved with confidence, like he knew every inch of this neighborhood. When they finally reached the pharmacy, Marcus saw her. Isabella was huddled under the awning, soaked and shivering, her school uniform plastered to her body. Her eyes were red from crying, but when she saw Marcus, relief flooded her face. Pai! Marcus waded to her and pulled her into his arms. She was cold, trembling, but alive and safe. He held her like he'd never let go, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. Tá tudo bem, he whispered into her hair. Tá tudo bem agora. It's okay. It's okay now. The young man stood a few feet away, giving them space. When Marcus finally looked up, the guy was watching them with a small smile. There was something in his eyes, something soft and knowing. Marcus pulled back from Isabella, but kept one arm around her shoulders. Obrigado, he said to the young man. E sério, obrigado. Se não fosse por você... Thank you, seriously, thank you. If it wasn't for you... Não precisa agradecer, the guy said. É só... retribuindo favor. You don't need to thank me. I'm just returning a favor. Marcus frowned. A gente se conhece? Do we know each other? The young man's smile widened. Faz 2 anos. Eu estava parado num ponto de ônibus encharcado sem dinheiro. Tu parou mesmo não sendo o ponto oficial. Me deixou entrar de graça. Tu não deve lembrar. 2 years ago, I was standing at a bus stop, soaked, no money. You stopped even though it wasn't an official stop. Let me on for free. You probably don't remember. Marcus stared at him. The memory came back slowly, like a photograph developing. The rain, the skinny kid, the backpack. Rafael? Rafael Lima. The young man extended his hand. Tu me deu uma carona naquela noite. Eu estava voltando do meu primeiro dia num emprego novo. Eu estava com medo de ser mandado embora porque eu tinha chegado atrasado por causa da chuva. Mas eu não fui, e aquele emprego mudou tudo. Me deu dinheiro para ajudar minha mãe. Me deu oportunidade de estudar à noite. Hoje eu trabalho com a Defesa Civil, ajudando pessoas em emergências. Tudo começou porque tu parou naquele dia. You gave me a ride that night. I was coming back from my first day at a new job. I was afraid I'd get fired because I'd arrived late because of the rain. But I wasn't. And that job changed everything, gave me money to help my mom, gave me the opportunity to study at night. Today I work with civil defense, helping people in emergencies. It all started because you stopped that day. Marcus couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. Isabella looked between them, confused but understanding that something important was happening. Rafael continued, his voice steady but emotional. Eu nunca esqueci teu rosto, nem o número do ônibus. 47. Eu sempre quis te agradecer, mas nunca te vi de novo, até hoje. Eu estava ajudando a evacuar pessoas nessa área quando eu te vi, e eu pensei, agora é minha chance. Agora eu posso retribuir. I never forgot your face, or the bus number. 47. I always wanted to thank you, but I never saw you again until today. I was helping evacuate people in this area when I saw you, and I thought, now's my chance. Now I can give back. The rain was still falling, but it felt lighter somehow. Marcus reached out and gripped Rafael's shoulder. Tu salvou minha filha, he said, his voice breaking. You saved my daughter. Tu me salvou primeiro, Rafael replied. You saved me first. They stood there for a moment, three people connected by a choice made on a rainy night 2 years ago, a choice that seemed small at the time, insignificant, just a bus driver stopping for a wet kid. But that choice had rippled outward, changing a life, creating a path, and now in this moment it had come full circle. Rafael helped them navigate back through the flooded streets to higher ground, where Marcus's brother eventually picked them up. Before they parted ways, Rafael gave Marcus his number. Se vocês precisarem de alguma coisa, qualquer coisa, me liga. If you need anything at all, call me. Marcus saved the number. As they drove home, Isabella asked what had happened, what the connection was. Marcus told her the whole story about the rainy night and the skinny kid, and the choice to stop. Isabella listened, then leaned her head against her father's shoulder. Tu sempre faz isso, she said quietly. Tu sempre para ajudar. You always do that. You always stop to help. Marcus thought about that. Did he always help? No, not always. There were days he drove past people who needed help, days he was too tired, too late, too wrapped up in his own problems. He wasn't a saint. He was just a man who sometimes, when the moment asked for it, chose kindness over convenience. And somehow, in ways he'd never see, those moments mattered. In the weeks that followed, the story spread. Isabella told her friends. Marcus's co-workers heard about it. Rafael mentioned it to his team at the civil defense. People called it fate, or karma, or divine intervention. Marcus didn't know what to call it. He just knew that the world was more connected than we think. That small acts of goodness don't disappear into the void. They ripple outward, touching lives in ways we can't predict or measure. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we get to see the ending. We get to witness the return of something we thought was lost. Marcus went back to driving the number 47 bus. Same route, same stops, same routine. But now he looked at his passengers differently. Every tired worker, every wet kid, every person waiting in the rain. They were all someone's daughter, someone's son, someone's Rafael. And maybe one day, years from now, the kindness he showed them would come back in a way he'd never expect. Or maybe it wouldn't. Maybe he'd never know. But that didn't matter. You don't help people because you expect a return. You help because it's the right thing to do, because we're all just trying to get home in the rain. Isabella graduated from her technical program with honors. She went on to study environmental engineering at university, specializing in urban flood management. She said she wanted to help cities like São Paulo prepare for the storms that were only getting worse. Marcus was proud, but not surprised. She'd always been the type to turn pain into purpose. Rafael continued his work with civil defense, eventually becoming a coordinator for emergency response in the Eastern Zone. He and Marcus stayed in touch, meeting for coffee every few months, swapping stories about the city and its people. They became friends, the kind forged in crisis and gratitude. Sometimes Rafael brought his younger siblings to meet Marcus, telling them about the bus driver who'd changed his life. Marcus always felt embarrassed by the praise, but he listened. He was learning to accept that his actions mattered, even when he couldn't see how. There was one particular afternoon, about 6 months after the flood, when Marcus was driving his route and saw a woman standing in the rain at a bus stop. She had a baby in her arms wrapped in a thin blanket, and she was crying. The stop wasn't official. Marcus was running late. He had every reason to keep going, but he didn't. He stopped. He opened the doors. He helped her onto the bus and didn't ask for fare. She thanked him through tears, told him she was trying to get to the hospital, that her baby had a fever and she didn't have money for a taxi. Marcus drove her to the nearest hospital, even though it meant going off route. When she got off the bus, she thanked him again, holding his hand like he was some kind of angel. He wasn't. He was just a bus driver, but maybe that was enough. Later that night, lying in bed, Marcus thought about Raphael, about Isabella, about the woman with the baby, about all the small moments that add up to a life. He thought about the choices we make when nobody's watching, when there's no reward, no recognition, just the quiet decision to be kind. Those were the moments that mattered. Those were the moments that built the world we wanted to live in. He fell asleep with that thought, and in his dreams, he was back on that rainy night 2 years ago. But this time, when he opened the bus doors for the wet kid named Raphael, he could see the future unfurling like a map. He could see Raphael growing up, getting stronger, becoming the man who would save Isabella. He could see the connections forming, invisible threads linking one act of kindness to another, creating a web of goodness that held the world together. When he woke up, the dream faded, but the feeling stayed. The feeling that we're all connected, that nothing we do is wasted. That love, in whatever form it takes, always finds its way back home. Marcus continued driving the 47 bus for another 15 years. He became known among the regulars as the driver who always stopped, who always helped, who always saw people instead of passengers. When he finally retired, the transit company threw him a party. Raphael came, now married with kids of his own. Isabella came, working as an engineer for the city, designing flood prevention systems. All the people whose lives he'd touched, in small ways and large, came to say thank you. Marcus stood in front of them, overwhelmed, and said the only thing he could think of. Eu só dirigia o ônibus. I just drove the bus. But Raphael stood up and said, Não, tu fez muito mais que isso. Tu mostrou que gentileza importa, que a gente nunca sabe o resultado das nossas ações, que uma parada de ônibus pode mudar uma vida. No, you did much more than that. You showed that kindness matters, that we never know the outcome of our actions, that a bus stop can change a life. The room erupted in applause. Marcus looked at his daughter, at Raphael, at all the faces surrounding him, and he understood. He'd spent his whole life thinking his job was small, insignificant, just a way to pay the bills and put food on the table. But it wasn't. Every route he drove was an opportunity. Every passenger was a story. Every choice to stop, to help, to see people's humanity. Those choices rippled outward in ways he'd never fully understand. And that was okay. You don't need to see the whole picture. You just need to do the next right thing. The party ended late. Marcus drove home with Isabella, who'd insisted on taking him even though he was perfectly capable of taking the bus. Eu sei que tu é capaz, she said, mas hoje deixa eu te dar carona. I know you're capable, but today, let me give you a ride. They drove through the same streets he'd been driving for decades, past the same stops, the same corners, the same memories. The city had changed. New buildings had gone up. Old neighborhoods had been renovated. But the rhythm of it, the heartbeat, that was the same. Tu vai sentir falta? Isabella asked. Are you going to miss it? Marcus thought about it. Sim e não. Vou sentir falta das pessoas, mas estou pronto para descansar. Yes and no. I'll miss the people. But I'm ready to rest. Isabella smiled. Tu merece, pai, tu merece descansar. You deserve it, Dad. You deserve to rest. They pulled up to his building, and Marcus got out. Before closing the door, he leaned back in. Isa. Sim? Obrigado. Por tudo. Por ser quem tu é. Thank you. For everything. For being who you are. She reached over and squeezed his hand. Eu aprendi com o melhor. I learned from the best. Marcus went upstairs to his apartment, made himself some coffee and sat by the window looking out at the city. The rain was starting again, gentle this time, washing the streets clean. Somewhere out there, someone was standing at a bus stop, waiting for a ride. Somewhere a driver was deciding whether to stop or keep going. Somewhere a choice was being made that would ripple outward into the future, creating connections nobody could predict. Marcus hoped that driver would stop. He hoped kindness would win. Because in the end, that's all we have, the small moments, the small choices, the decision to see each other, to help each other, to recognize that we're all just trying to get home in the rain. The story of Marcus and Raphael became something of a legend in their neighborhood. People told it at dinner tables, in community centers, in schools. It became a reminder that goodness isn't wasted, that what goes around comes around, that the universe has a way of balancing things out. But more than that, it became a call to action. Because the thing about stories like this is that they're not meant to be just heard. They're meant to be lived. They're an invitation to be the person who stops, to be the person who helps, to be the person who makes the choice that might someday save a life. You rarely see the ending of your kindness. Most of the time you help someone and they disappear into their own story and you never know what happened next. But every once in a while, the universe gives you a gift. It shows you the ripple effect. It brings the story full circle. And when that happens, you realize that nothing is wasted. No act of love, no moment of compassion, no choice to stop when you could keep going. None of it is lost. It's all building towards something. It's all part of a bigger story that we can't see from our limited vantage point. So what's the lesson? Maybe it's that we should treat every interaction like it matters, because it does. Maybe it's that we're more connected than we think, and the person we help today might be the person who saves our daughter tomorrow. Or maybe the lesson is simpler than that. Maybe it's just this. Be kind. Stop for the kid in the rain. Open the door. Share what you have. Make the choice that your future self will be proud of, because you never know what that moment will become. You never know whose life you're changing. You never know when that kindness will come back to you when you need it most. Marcus lived another 20 years after his retirement. He saw Isabella get married, have kids of her own. He saw Raphael become a leader in his field, training new generations of emergency responders. He saw the city change and grow and struggle and survive, and through it all he carried the knowledge that his life had mattered, not because he'd done anything extraordinary, not because he'd cured diseases or built empires or changed laws, but because he'd driven a bus with compassion, because he'd seen people, because he'd stopped when he could have kept going. When Marcus passed away, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, the funeral was packed. Isabella stood at the front, delivering the eulogy, and she told the story of the rainy night. She told it the way he'd told it to her, with all the details, all the small moments that added up to something big. And when she finished, Raphael stood up and told his version. And then others stood, people Marcus had helped over the years, and they told their stories too. The woman with the sick baby, who'd gone on to become a nurse. The teenager he'd let ride for free when she was running away from an abusive home, who'd later founded a shelter for domestic violence survivors. The elderly man he'd helped carry groceries off the bus every week for 5 years, who'd lived long enough to see his great-grandchildren because someone had cared. The stories went on for hours, each one a thread in the tapestry of a life well lived, each one a testament to the power of small choices made with great love. And when it was over, when everyone had said their goodbyes and the church had emptied, Isabella and Raphael stood together in the rain, because of course it was raining, and they made a promise. They would carry on his legacy. They would be the ones who stopped. They would be the ones who saw people. They would be the drivers who opened the doors. And they did. Isabella, through her work building flood-resistant infrastructure that saved countless lives. Raphael, through his emergency response work that pulled people from danger time and time again. And both of them through the small daily choices to be kind, to help, to show up for people even when it was inconvenient. They became the ripple effect of Marcus's ripple effect, spreading outward infinitely, touching lives they'd never meet, creating connections they'd never see, because that's how it works. That's how love works. That's how kindness works. It doesn't end with one person or one moment. It multiplies, it grows, it becomes bigger than any of us. And if we're lucky, we get to be part of that story. We get to be the link in the chain. We get to be the reason someone else survives, thrives, lives to tell their own story. Marcus's story is fictional, based on the countless real stories of ordinary people making extraordinary choices every single day. But the truth it tells is real. The invitation it offers is real. We all have opportunities to stop for the kid in the rain. We all have moments where we can choose kindness over convenience. We all have the power to change someone's life in ways we'll never fully understand. The question is, will we? Will we be the person who stops? Will we be the person who helps? Will we be the person whose small act of kindness ripples outward into the future, creating connections and saving lives and building the world we want to live in? The answer to that question is written in the choices we make every single day, in the passengers we see, in the doors we open, in the moments we choose love over indifference. So here's the challenge, the call, the invitation. Be a Marcus. Be a Raphael. Be someone who understands that we're all connected, that goodness matters, that small acts of kindness have the power to change everything. You might never see the ending of your story. You might never know whose life you changed. But trust that it matters. Trust that nothing is wasted. Trust that somewhere, someday, your kindness will come back to you, or to your daughter, or to someone you love. Because that's how the universe works. That's how love works. That's how we build a world worth living in. One rainy night, one bus stop, one choice to stop, and 2 lives changed forever. Yours could be next. The person you help today could be the person who saves your child tomorrow. Or maybe they won't. Maybe you'll never know, but help them anyway, stop anyway. Choose kindness anyway, because in the end, that's what builds the bridge between who we are and who we want to be. That's what creates the world where nobody stands alone in the rain. That's what makes us human. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the power we all have to make a difference, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. These stories aren't just meant to entertain, they're meant to inspire action. They're meant to remind us that ordinary people doing ordinary things with extraordinary love can change the world. By subscribing, you're joining a community of people who believe that kindness matters, that stories matter, that we're all connected in ways we can't always see. You're saying yes to more stories like this. Stories that challenge us, move us, and call us to be better. So hit that subscribe button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And then go out and be the person who stops for the kid in the rain. Be the ripple effect. Be the change. Be the reason someone else's story has a happy ending. Because you never know. You never know what that moment will become. You never know whose life you're changing. You never know when your kindness will save a life. But do it anyway. Stop anyway. Help anyway. Love anyway. That's the lesson. That's the truth. That's the story we're all writing together, one choice at a time.